And welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. I am your host, James Just. With me today is the dashing John Cameron. You're dashing today, John. And I want to remind our listeners out there that if you support Free Speech TV, today is the big day of giving. You can go to bigdayofgiving.org/access-sacramento, smash that donate button, and give deep or give wide. Just give.
How about give deep and wide?
There you go.
How about an ongoing donation? So that every month an amount so small that you won't notice it, well, maybe a little bit, goes to Access Sacramento, and it just keeps going and keeps going.
And Access Sacramento has supported the free speech here for Libertarian Counterpoint for over 30 years, and I think our audience...
Longest running libertarian show in the country, I believe.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Maybe in the whole world.
That would not surprise me either, John. It would not surprise me either. So for our audience, I will remind you at the end of the show, but you've got 4 hours left, so go do that. All right, John, Supreme Court is thinking about reining in, or is considering reining in the administrative state over a fisheries case. I guess the overall reach is, what powers do bureaucrats essentially have to actually write their own laws?
Well, there's something called Chevron deference, and if any of my former attorney buddies at where I used to work are watching, don't laugh at me, try to explain it. I think it was Chevron v. EPA in the 80s, where the courts decided that these things were so complex that if there was a question about the interpretation of a rule, that they would defer to the expertise of the various letter agencies and all of their administrators. Well, what these letter agencies have done, especially the EPA and the FDA and the communist disease creating CDC and all the rest of them did was assume that they could basically interpret the broad brushstroke guidance given to them to do their job in any way they see fit, and that at least at the state and local and regional levels, the courts defer to this tomfoolery. And not so much at the Supreme Court, not so much in federal courts, but well, it depends. In the Ninth Circuit, they defer to anybody that draws a paycheck from the government, which is most people. And in this case, some agency, I don't know who, fisheries, is that at Department of Interior, even though it's in the ocean, they decided that the fishermen needed to pay for the monitors that they said had to monitor the catch. So they said catches had to be monitored. They couldn't do it, in a simplistic way. That they actually had to have somebody observe and count and all the rest of that. And the fishermen who've watched the areas where they can fish shrink to ever smaller areas, and their fishing seasons also shrink, and their costs go through the roof, had to pay for this out of the pocket. So some fishing group, commercial fishing group, brought a lawsuit, and the Supreme Court decided to hear it. The wonderful thing is, what's her name? Ksenia Jackson, the newest Supreme Court.
Oh yeah, no,
it's Jackson. Right?
Yeah, I'll butcher her name. Yeah.
She was in on the original decision of lower court somehow, and so she has to recuse herself, which means that people who actually understand constitutional law and have experience, the rest of the judges, bar two, will decide. And the rumblings out of the Supreme Court is that deference, that Chevron deference, should have ended a long time ago. And if it isn't ended, it's certainly going to be reined in. And so, the idea, imagine if you had to go to court and there was a rule of law, and the government interpreted it one way and you another, and instead of having equal footing, whatever the government interpreted, let's say it's just DNA evidence, they decide, oh, our DNA evidence shows that you murdered this person. And you say, well, the DNA evidence doesn't show anything. And then the judge says, well, the government says it does, so I'm going to defer to them. Basically, not in criminal cases, but in civil cases. That's been the way of the world for about 40 years. And so it means that these administrative letter agencies have been able to do basically whatever they want in every single instance, and the courts support them in it. It's called deferring to, or deference. And that very well might end with this case, which would be wonderful.
Yeah, because we've seen the explosion of the administrative state, right? We've watched it in the last 30 years, 40 years. It's just exploded in size and scope, and there hasn't been really, the laws haven't changed that much.
No, there hasn't been, Congress hasn't gone in and said, okay, EPA, I want you to have control of every single drop of water that falls on the land, whether it's, because it was originally defined, waters in the United States were defined as navigable waters, and I worked for a place that defended a guy that was thrown in prison, an 80-year-old man thrown in prison for digging firefighting ponds and using the water that was the equivalent of 3 garden hoses. So it's gone from waters of the United States, navigable waters, to 3 garden hoses. And nowhere do I remember Congress sitting down and saying, yeah, we're going to change navigable waters to filling a bathtub.
Yeah, and well, they're also talking puddles, and
it's crazy.
They've gone outrageous.
And believe me, I guarantee you, I am more concerned about the environment than 95% of the environmental radicals really concerned about it. The fact that the bird chopping, tax farms in Altamont Pass, that one place has killed 1,000 golden eagles. That's one place. That disgusts me. But it doesn't disgust a lot of people who claim that they're environmentalists.
Yeah, well,
why.
Yeah, and if it had been a power plant, a nuclear power plant that had killed those birds.
No, if it killed one bird.
One bird, yeah, it had been closed down.
Yeah.
California Air Resources Board is mandating an end to diesel truck sales in the state by 2036. Now, even if you think that we can replace diesel trucks with batteries by 2036, is the mandate actually the way to even work? That's not how progress actually works. Progress doesn't work by mandates. Mandates come in after something has become a standard. Then you mandate it for the future. That's how it has always worked in the past, right? Even seatbelts. We all talk about the advantage of seatbelts, but by the time the government got around to mandating seatbelts, 80% of the cars had already had them as standard. And so they weren't actually mandating anything. They were just saying, okay, we can't
catch up.
They were saying we can't go back. We don't want to go back. We're creating a floor. And that's kind of fine, right? You don't actually change the market that way. You're just kind of creating a floor that you can't go back. But what they are trying to do is they're trying to create a new market without understanding how actually markets work.
Or how trucks work. Really. I mean, we could go on and on and on about this. I mean, there are ways to make diesel exhaust pretty darn clean. And if you if you are going to mandate an end of a certain type of fuel without knowing, I mean, basically in a lot of cars now, the air that comes out of the exhaust is cleaner than the air that goes into the air filter. Pert near. The air in California is amazingly clean in most places. Yeah, we have bad air days here, but that's because we live in a valley. I mean, there's nothing to do about this, and so, the idea that something that works and works pretty darn well, you're going to decide that somehow by then you guys are going to figure out an economically viable way to replace it. To me is just crazy.
Yeah, they've been working on batteries for cars for 100 years, and we still haven't gotten anywhere.
Nobody who's a futurist with any kind of brain is going to tell you that batteries are a long-term solution. Battery-powered cars. There's if it was possible to create a battery that would do all the things they need batteries to do to make battery-powered cars equal to gasoline-powered cars in efficiency and concentration of power, it would violate the laws of physics. There's no way you can make a battery to do that. Now, hydrogen fuel cells, whole different story. But you need a lot of electricity to create hydrogen.
Yeah, which is the answer is nuclear.
Nuclear reactor, which is the only source of energy where the byproducts are captured, and then we can just recycle them like they've done in France for 50 years.
And we know how to do clean nuclear. We really do. It's been done for decades, and we pretend it's not. You know, and we have the one accident Chernobyl
why don't we
has
just
scared everybody.
pretend that we're not going to pay any attention to the stupid rule?
Or we can pretend that the rule's still going to be there by 2036, that they won't change it when the economic realities hit.
When the lizard people of planet Zircon come in and take over, I don't think anybody's going to care about diesel trucks.
Chicago is finally starting to understand its sanctuary city problem. And maybe they're starting to understand the problems that the border states
San Diego
are starting to face. Right.
All of Texas, all of Florida, all of Louisiana, all of Mississippi, but have 10,000 people show up in Chicago and it's the end of the world, baby.
Yeah. That's the thing that actually gets me. It's not the fact that say, hey, we can't deal with this. We don't have the resources because Chicago's struggling. They probably don't have the resources. But does El Paso have the resources?
No.
Does San Diego have the resources?
No.
But they were wagging their finger at Arizona and Texas for having their anti-immigration things. But they're exactly in the same spot now. Stop sending them to us because we can't deal with it. Well, maybe we should deal with the immigration issue holistically. I mean, this is a problem where we as libertarians, we have issues, right? Because we generally believe that open borders or immigration should be easy. If not open borders, immigration should be easy. Sent back in the days of Ellis Island, right? Where you get in, you get processed, and you go through.
Yeah, and they change your name because they can't spell Lebowski, and
right. You get sent through, But how do you deal with that when you have this explosion of immigration? When there's just hundreds of thousands of people flowing, how do you actually deal with it?
Are they coming from Switzerland, which is a market economy, or are they coming from Sweden, which is a market economy? They keep calling it socialist. The people who run Sweden tell you flat out we're a market economy. They're more of a market economy than the United States of America. Where are these people coming from? Places who have taken the progressive concept a step further than we have and destroyed their economies. They're coming from Venezuela. They're coming from Mexico, where our failed drug policies have caused so many problems. They're coming from everywhere they can come from that socialism and communism or military dictatorships have happened to risk their life to come to a place where they think there's economic freedom, they can bootstrap themselves. So there's lots of lessons here. And folks, guess what? You think you have problems in Chicago, try to deal with it in Texas or Arizona or California, and you'll see. And immigrants do all the hard work in this country anyway. So,
And we talk about everywhere. I was reading a story the other day where a lot of rich Chinese citizens are now getting to Mexico and then coming over the border from Mexico into the United States because they're just trying to get out of China. And it's these oppressive states, these oppressive, progressive, left-wing communist states that these are fleeing from.
There used to be an impenetrable jungle that was a barrier just this side or that side of Panama. I'm not really good on geography in that area. It was an impenetrable jungle. But so many people are fleeing horrific conditions, mostly in socialist countries, by the way, that they've actually, with their feet, trod down an impenetrable jungle to get to what they see as freedom and opportunity. There's some lessons here, folks. The fact that these sanctuary cities are inching toward or trying to run towards socialism and communism and all that happy horse pucky as fast as they can, but everybody that's fleeing to them is fleeing exactly the same thing.
Yeah, they're going to create.
There's a lesson.
They're going to create the They're trying to create the conditions that immigrants are fleeing from. And we're watching
You
it.
said it much better than I did.
And we're actually watching it in the streets. In here in California, we're seeing it in the streets.
Yeah.
You have to be blind to not see it. So if you're seeing it, but you're not understanding it, that's deliberate ignorance, and I'm not sure what to deal with that. How to deal with that one?
Or we'll say that then they teach you not to believe your eyes or your ears.
Yeah, not to believe the truth of your own eyes. Yeah. So believing the truth of our own eyes, that will bring us on to France. France is caught in a doom loop, and its creditors are finally starting to notice. France, many libertarians are kind of happy that the protests in France, but I keep trying to remind them they're not actually protesting for freedom. They're protesting for more government involvement in their lives, and so they want
More handouts.
More handouts. They want they want more. What? They want the retirement to stay early. They want all these extra benefits.
Retire at 62. What do they think they are? A state worker? Oh my gosh, a teacher? How dare they?
Yeah, it's not even it's not necessarily just the retirement ages. It's what France is pointing out is that these social programs, they have an end expiration date. As Margaret Thatcher used to say, you eventually run out of other people's money. And that's what's happening in France, is they are running out of other people's money. And its creditors are going, how are you going to pay us back?
Well, they lost their AAA rating, and they've got AA, and they're heading toward AA minus. But here's the scary thing. One of the articles we looked at, we looked at it through, I'm not even going to mention those letters there. It originally came from, I think it was a Reason article, and it ended up there. I could be wrong. Excuse me, was talking about the percentage of GDP that is a deficit and the percentage of total national debt in relation to GDP. And our numbers are actually in this country slightly worse than France's because of the largesse of the buying the votes over the last few years and trying to buy our way out of the pandemic. So you throw in, and that's just federal numbers, but you throw in all their state and local unfunded pension obligations, all the rest of that, we're way upside down. And the number's crazy. France owes, I think, 1.26 times its GDP and national debt, and we're right around the same number. Their deficit is running at about 6% of their GDP, and those numbers are unsustainable. And every place in the world that has tried, England tried it and had to back off. Japan tried it and had to back off. Israel was basically a collective, religious collective, and it goes good for a little while until, as Margaret Thatcher was paraphrased to say, you run out of other people's money. You can only do this kind of stuff for so long when you realize a market economy is the only way to go. And so, France, it's pretty obvious, and we like to laugh at people about their 30-hour weeks and they're retiring at 62, but a whole big portion of our population in the United States, those that work for government agencies and school districts and the military and the police and all the rest of that, can retire in their 50s with 60% and sometimes 100% of their salary, their highest salary, and that's unsustainable. You can't sustain it. Okay, I've been on a rant, haven't I?
Yeah, it does make it unsustainable. When we think about it that way, we're paying for workers, not just people who are retired. When you think of retired people in their late 60s, 70s, are retired and often
People like me, folks.
You're talking about people like me who are 53 years old, retiring from their state job, still collecting the state, and then off working as a consultant for the state.
For the state.
Yeah, and that's how it works. And that's it. And you can understand in some points. You can understand it to a point, but when it happens to everybody and everywhere in every single agency, and you're creating new agencies all the time. They now want to create the reparations agency here in California, just another government agency where you got government workers sitting there pushing paper, and
Well, you forgot the most important thing. They pay union dues.
They pay union dues and they vote Democratic. And we wonder why we're in a single-party state. Anyway, Anthony Fauci says, don't blame him for COVID lockdowns and school closures, which I told everybody this is what was going to happen.
Of course.
Is they were just going to pretend they didn't do what they did. That's what was going to happen.
What's her name? Teagarden, the head of the Teachers Association? She's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's outright lies. This is what people. Yeah, never mind. I'll let you vent about this one. Go ahead. Go ahead, James.
Listening to these people, they're gaslighting us, and they're pretending we're not, and they're going to have their lackeys in the news media are going to go right along with it.
They do. Wall Street Journal.
They're just going to go, yeah, no, you didn't have anything. They didn't say anything. What? Yes, they did.
Wait a second. You printed it in your paper. How can you say they didn't say it? You quoted them verbatim. How can you say they didn't say it? Yeah.
Yeah, we can bring up the YouTube clips. We can show you the clips. Oh well, that's not what we meant. That's not really what we said. That's not wasn't our intent. They'll give you all kinds of.
That's not us. That's a deep fake. That's
Yeah.
what they're going to try next.
That's what they'll. Yeah, would not surprise me. They're going to use these AIs and then potentials to fake their way through these. But as I warned everybody, people were asking me, how are they going to back off from this? How are they going to back off from this? And I said, they're just going to pretend they didn't. They're just going to move on because that's what they always do.
Let's talk some specifics here, because Fauci, there's a senator from Kentucky, Mr. Rand Paul, who's been calling out Anthony Fauci from day one and raking him over the coals and calling him on his BS. And he annoys some people, but then he's a doctor, and doctors are annoying. Rand Paul is an ophthalmologist, like his father, I believe is.
He's an eye surgeon, so he actually knows about.
He knows some medicine, yeah. And Fauci is claiming, he's being deified because he did so much during the AIDS epidemic. And you talk to people who lived through the AIDS epidemic, and they will tell you flat out Anthony Fauci is the reason that their ex-wives and husbands, they were widowed like 3 times. And now his horrible regressive policies of pushing, chemicals that were more deadly than the disease in many cases. Yes, now people who have AIDS can live much longer, but Anthony Fauci was not a hero then, and he's not a hero now. And if you stand in front of people and say one thing, and then a month later say another, and then 3 months later say another, and then everything that you say is a lie, and then you say that you didn't say all of those lies. He said, this is going to be over in a while. At the beginning, he said it's no worse than the flu. Then he said, it's the deadliest thing on earth, but masks won't help you. And he said masks won't help you because he wanted to make sure that the medical professionals had enough masks. So he flat out lied. So if masks helped, where is the murder charge on his head for telling old people they should not wear masks? That's basically, he killed those people. And if they didn't work, then he wasted our time for putting masks on. And then over and over and over again, he said that you will not transmit the disease if you have the COVID vaccines. Turned out that was a lie. And he said you won't get the disease if you had COVID vaccines. Well, that's for about 2 weeks, and they wear off. That was a lie. Over and over and over again. And he supported these hard lockdowns and promoted them. And now I said, you could talk about it, but I'm doing the rant, man.
And now they're saying, I didn't say that. But it's not just him. It's that whole complex of authoritarianism that popped up during COVID. And now they're going to pretend they weren't. And
people in power can rewrite history, bro.
Yeah, who writes the history? Yeah. Well, hopefully there's enough of us out here who are willing to keep talking where the history can't be rewritten. But thinking of things that are rewritten, leftists are fuming mad after a Republican councilman decided to identify as an Indian woman to shatter that glass ceiling. And this is one of the things. And now, of course, the left is all mad at him, attacking him. But you're not allowed to question people who identify, right? That's the whole point.
No, they're allowed to question him.
Right.
But he's not allowed to question them. What's good for me is not good for thee. Yeah. Anyway, I've been ranting enough today. I've been ranting enough.
It's we go back to this point where I get to be free, but you don't get to be free. I get to express myself, and I get to demand that the world treat me how I want to be treated, but I don't have to respect you. And that's kind of where we've gone in today's society, and things like this actually kind of point it out. Yeah, it's goofy. I wouldn't actually condone anybody kind of doing this kind of thing if you're not really identifying as a
No, and
something else.
I absolutely agree. I feel for people who, and whether you're dysmorphic, everybody goes through doubts about, their inner core issues, especially when they're going through the hormonal rush of adolescence. People have experiences that change them. There's some people, who have an adult having the ability to change themselves in any way they want, into anything they want, whether they want it or believe they have to have it. I'm a libertarian. I'm all for that, folks. I don't care. I feel for people who haven't been allowed to express themselves in the way they want to for years, and now they can, but they can't decide that someone else can't do the same thing. I mean, express yourself, wear a MAGA hat in San Francisco and walk down the street. I'll bet you get hit by something thrown at you. But you demand that people, I don't like Trump, so I'm not supporting the MAGA thing.
Yeah, but the point is that you have people who want to be able to be free, but don't want to allow others to be free. Right? They want to have the freedom to act and be who they are, and we support that here. But that requires everybody has the right to act and be who they are.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one of the things that in the modern society today we have lost.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
We've just completely lost it. Everybody is becoming desperately selfish, and that selfishness is disintegrating our communities. And these kind of things, while they help kind of disintegrate our communities, they also help point out the hypocrisy of these statements, of these positions that people are holding.
It's and it is hypocritical too. I can on the one hand say to you that I am not going to question your motives or your sanity or your need or anything else, and then have you turn around and question mine for the same thing. This guy could be simply doing this to show, and I think he probably is, show the ridiculousness of the double standard in this area.
But what is not ridiculous is the big day of giving here at Access Sacramento. You have 3.5 hours left to give us, to go find bigdayofgiving.org/Access Sacramento if memory serves, and donate. If not to here, to somewhere else, because the free speech and the community is what we're all about.
You want to throw out some other names beside Access Sacramento?
I would if I had them on the top of my mind, John.
I've got
it's
one,
the end of a long day.
Sacramento Ballet, folks.
There you go.
They do beautiful ballet. They
And
really do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Support them. If you haven't seen them, it's a wonderful show.
Like we said, support wide, support deep, just support.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for joining us, John. Thank you here at Access Sacramento for putting us on. Thank you, the crew, for getting all the technical side done. And all you out there, please remember to love everybody and have a good night.
And probably there are some other ones, Sacramento Symphony, if it's still around.
I think the Gay Men's